Performance management practices have attracted a lot of criticism. Critics say performance monitoring is directly related to the stress, mental fatigue, and physical tiredness of the employees. At times, employees may feel that the constant targets and pressures are too much to cope with. Sometimes, performance ratings can be irrelevant if employees have little control over their performance targets. Sometimes, human errors can make the performance management a subjective process. In the worst case, performance appraisal can create fear, disrupt teamwork, and build rivalry and politics within an organization. Now we will discuss the most common performance appraisal errors. Contrast effect. Sometimes an appraiser might rate someone superbly on the basis that the previous candidate performed very poorly. Or it could be the opposite. Your boss gives you poor rating just because your colleague was so good. This is also contrast effect. The contrast effect can be highly demotivating for employees because they are being compared to an experienced or talented individual. Rather, employees should have been compared against their own performance goals. The first impression error. Sometimes an employee shows an excellent performance at the beginning of the review period, and the appraiser gives overall assessment on this first impression even though subsequent performance of the employee is not good. This is called the first impression error. This is obviously problematic because the entire review period is not taken into account. Recency effect. Recency effect is just the opposite of the first impression error. Recency effect occurs when the appraiser only remembers performance at the end of the review period, and he fully ignores performance at the beginning of the review period. The halo effect. The halo effect occurs when an appraiser lets his overall opinion of an employee influence the rating. Let's say a supervisor observes an employee arriving late to work on certain occasions. The supervisor then develops a negative perception about the performance of the employee, even though being late on several occasions might have no relevance on the performance. Similar to me effect. Let's take an example. An employee might have an interest in football, and the appraiser also takes a lot of interest in football. This positively influences the appraiser's assessment of the person and his performance. This is similar to me effect, and it occurs when an employee receives a favorable rating because he has similar characteristics or qualities as the appraiser. Central tendency bias. Sometimes an appraiser gives employees a score in the middle of the rating scale, thus rating all employees as average. This is central tendency bias. In doing so, the appraiser avoids making tough decisions about poor performance or even good performance. Skewing bias. The skewing bias occurs when performance results are scored largely to the left or the right of the scale. The appraiser is overly positive or overly negative in their ratings. This distorts the accurate assessment of performance. Attributional bias. Attributional bias refers to the systematic errors people make when trying to find reasons for certain behaviors. An appraiser might assume that an employee's performance is poor because the person is lazy, thereby providing them with a low score. However, there may be other underlying reasons for poor performance. For example, the employee is lacking appropriate skills to perform the job. Stereotyping. Stereotyping refers to our tendency to make generalizations about particular types of people. For example, managers may stereotype by saying that all young employees are lazy, or that employees hired from a particular university have great technical skills. But actually, it is important that managers consider individual differences. They should not make generalized assumptions about a certain group.